Well, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 20 today. One thing, just another quick announcement so you know, we don't have our Wednesday night service going for the next several months. The facility where we were doing it is sold to new owners, and we need to take a break from that. So if you want to show up there on Wednesday night to our Wednesday night service, you're more than welcome to sit outside that coffee shop. There's chairs out there, but we won't be there. Today we're going to look at Genesis chapter 20 and into chapter 21. Over the years, a lot of you have heard me share stories about eagles. How many of you have heard a story or two about eagles from me? I love bald eagles. I love how often I see them near my house and out on the logging road and in that area. And it's just one of those things where I find myself so often looking at these beautiful birds flying so high above everything. And I just catch myself thinking, I wish I was like that. I wish I could just soar above everything else, kind of get away from everything I have going on right here, all the stresses, anxieties, pressures, and just get up there and soar. And I actually had the opportunity to do that this week. My friend Jim took Kamala and I up flying, and have just a few pictures of those. There we go. That's us. We had the chance to go flying this week, and that's the Astoria Bridge. We left Canby from Aurora and flew out to up the Columbia to Astoria. That's just a picture of the coast near Tillamook. Went almost all the way down to Wainema to camp, and it was just a beautiful day out there. The plane that we got to fly in. And for 2.5 hours, I got to be like an eagle, right? My wonderful eagle powers. It was awesome. The entire time I was up there, and I was just wanting to be like, smoke in the air, smoke in the air. He's coming around Mav. But the plane wasn't quite that fast. And it was great. For 2.5 hours, I just got to put everything away. And then we landed. And we were back. And with that came back all the stresses, the pressures, everything else. The reality is life is hard. Life is really hard. And there are times that we get to get above it all, times we get to get away and kind of put it aside. But in general, life is very difficult. And the sooner that you realize that, the easier it's going to get for you. All right? As a church, our mission and our goal is to get to know God more. Because I firmly believe if you want to make it in this life and come out the other end whole, you need God in your life. As we look at Genesis 20 today, we're going to focus in on this. And my main question today is, what does this text tell us about the character of God? How do we get to know God more through this text right here? This is what we read in Genesis 20, starting at verse 1. From there, Abraham journeyed toward the territory of the Negeb and lived between Kadesh and Shur, and he sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah, his wife, "She is my sister." And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, "Behold, you are a dead man because of the woman whom you have taken, for she is another man's wife." Now, Abimelech had not approached her, so he said, "Lord, will you kill innocent people? Did he not himself say to me, 'She is my sister'? And she herself said, 'He is my brother.' In the integrity of my heart and the innocence of my hands, I have done this." Then God said to him in the dream, "Yes, I know that you have done this in the integrity of your heart, and it was I who kept you from sinning against me. Therefore, I did not let you touch her. Now then, return this man's wife, for he is a prophet, so that he will pray for you, and you shall live. But if you do not return her, know that you shall surely die, you and all who are yours. Let's stop right there. There's a lot of stuff going on with this kind of an odd text that we're in today. As we look at it, in the story, in context, we're in a time where over the last 2 chapters, there's been some huge things happen in the life of Abraham. One, Abraham was visited by God and by 2 angels. And as God was there with them, he reiterated his covenant to Abraham, that Abraham was going to be blessed with a son, and that out of him would come nations, kings, and peoples, that his offspring would be like the sand on the shore or like the stars in the sky. We had seen earlier in Genesis where Abram's wife, Sarah, decided to take things into her own hands. She was 90 years old. Abraham was 99, and she wasn't able to have babies. So she said, well, here is my slave. I will give her to Abraham. She will conceive, and the son she has will be my son. And as we read previously, and we will here in the near future, that just goes awry. They weren't willing to rest in God's promises and word, and instead took things into their own control and their own power, trying to fulfill God's plan their way, not his way. Mentioned that last week quite a bit. The ends never justify the means. Never. And that's what we learn in that story. God, in 2 chapters before this, looks at Abraham and once again says, hey, you're going to be a dad, and it's going to be through your wife, Sarah. And even though she is 90 years old, 1 year from now, I will return to you, and you will have a son. And it's one of those interesting moments in the Bible where Sarah is eavesdropping in her tent on this conversation, and she starts laughing. And God is like, looks at Abraham and says, why did your wife just laugh at me? And then she says, I didn't laugh at you. And he's like, no, surely you did laugh at me, right? That just says something about God right there and his character. Anytime you laugh at him, he is clearly aware of it, all right? So be careful there. You look at it, and there's these promises that are given, and at the end of the story, as it progresses, comes the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. The destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And really, when you look in the biblical text, it's not just the 2 cities, it's 5 cities in completion, all 5 destroyed. Interesting little tidbits. Most of you have probably learned from your maps in the back of your Bibles over the years, if you look at them, that Sodom and Gomorrah is like somewhere on the south end of the Dead Sea. That was actually promoted by one archaeologist around 100 years ago, and it didn't make a lot of sense to scholars. But over the last 20 years, they've actually discovered on the north end of the Dead Sea all of these ruins, and there is one major city with other cities around it, and it is massive, massive. It was buried underground, but that's most likely Sodom. And it's not just some little village. We are talking a massive city with all kinds of temples of worship in it and other things. God destroyed it. A lot of pastors and theologians, when they teach this passage, question why it begins with Abraham moving from where he was. And some even go so far to say he was living in sin by not staying right where his tent was. The biblical text doesn't say that at all. It doesn't say that he was living in sin by moving, and if anything, he probably moved for very practical reasons. About 2.5 years ago, we had my youngest daughter's wedding. Anna was supposed to be married on September 12th, and we had to cancel the wedding. But because her and her husband were getting ready to move down to Corvallis for college, and they were living together, they said, Dad, we still want to get married. We're going to be in the same apartment living together. And so we, on September 11th of 2020, had a very small ceremony with just family. Why did it have to get canceled? And why, as soon as the wedding was over, did my wife and I get out of town and go to the coast for a few days? Because of the fires that were happening. All the fires, from Detroit all the way out to the foothills of the Malala Hills and stuff. The fires were burning out there, and this area was dark. It was smoky. How many of you got out of town for a few days during that? That explains to you right there why Abraham left the area that he was in, that God said, I will give you this area. Sodom and Gomorrah were just absolutely demolished by sulfur and fire raining down from the sky. There's no way that he could have stayed exactly where he was. It's not an act of sin where he suddenly moves and goes this other direction. It's an act of wanting to be able to breathe, okay? Always a good thing. He ends up here, and we have this interaction with Abimelech. We don't know if Abimelech is this man's name or if it's a title like king, sort of like the Pharaoh. A lot of people think when they first read Exodus that Pharaoh is his name. No, it's a title. It means king. And other places in the Bible, Abimelech actually means king, and typically in regards to Philistines. You look at this, and Abraham comes here, and for the second time in Genesis, what we find is that Abraham goes somewhere and is confronted by a king. He is worried that he will be killed because his wife is so beautiful. So they tell that king, this is my sister, not my wife. The first time that happened was when there was a drought in the land, and Abraham had to flee to Egypt, and he does that with Pharaoh. But before the Pharaoh is able to sleep with Sarah, God puts a stop to it, and Sarah is given back to Abraham. Awful. That's awful. And yet we're seeing it happens a second time in the story of Abraham. Think about this. For Abimelech, all of a sudden at night in a dream, God appears to him, and he hears the comforting words, "You will surely die." All right? That's, the text says a dream. I call that a nightmare, okay? He's having a nightmare about this. And I love the interaction that takes place, though. Abimelech isn't a follower of God. He's a Philistine, right? And yet, a conversation happens back and forth with God. And Abimelech says to him, in the integrity of my heart, you know I'm innocent. Would you wipe out people that are innocent? I didn't do anything. This man lied to me. He didn't tell me this was his wife. He said this was his sister, and that's why I took her into my harem. Totally legal in those days to do that. And he was acting in innocence. And this conversation takes place with God, back and forth. It tells us two things about the character of God. One, he is a God who knows everything. Not just our actions, but even on the inside. He looks at Abimelech and he says, you're correct. In the integrity of your heart, inside, you didn't do anything. Not just merely your actions, but even your motives on the inside. You're innocent in this. That's incredible. God knows the things we think, the things we feel. Sometimes in the Old Testament, we get a little bit confused by the way they talk versus the way we communicate today. We tend to separate the mind from the heart and make them two different things. Old Testament, they don't do that. When they talk about the heart, they don't separate it. They actually mean your thoughts and feelings. They put the brain and the heart together. So this is huge. God knows the intentions of our thought life, of the feelings that are going on, He knows both when we are guilty, but also when we are innocent. That's amazing that he knows that. He always knows. The second thing this tells us about the character of God is that he is a God who listens. He listens. He declares this statement, and suddenly he's willing to have a conversation. We see that in previous chapters when it came to the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, where Abraham is willing to sit there and intercede on behalf of the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. And he says, Lord, will you destroy this city even if, what if there's like 50 righteous people there? Would you destroy it for 50? And God's like, no, for 50, I won't destroy it. But God knows there's not even 50 righteous people there. And Abraham's, okay, God, what about if there's 45? Like, let's just take it down 5. What if there's 45 righteous people there in that city? Will you still destroy it? No, Abraham, if there was 45 people there, I wouldn't destroy it. All right, Lord, well, what if there was 40 people? Would you destroy them? And it keeps going down and down and down until Abraham's like, Lord, please forgive me for questioning you, but what if there's just 10 righteous people there? If you could find 10 righteous people in Sodom, would you save the city? God's like, I would, but there's not even 10 righteous people there. Not even 10. And not only was God willing to save the one righteous man there, Lot, he was willing to save also Lot's unrighteous wife, his unrighteous daughters, and his unrighteous sons-in-law, just because they were related to Lot. There's this whole conversation going back and forth. Do you know what a conversation with God is called? Prayer. That's what prayer is. It's a conversation with God. We have access through Jesus Christ to speak to the God of all creation, to talk with him and share with him, to put out our requests, and to listen and see what he says. Abimelech, who is not a follower of God, is having this prayer-like conversation back and forth with God, and God knows the intentions of his heart. Verse 8, so Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all of his servants and told them all these things. And the men were very much afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said to him, what have you done to us? And how have I sinned against you that you have brought on me and my kingdom a great sin? You have done to me things that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said to Abraham, what did you see that you did this? What did you see that you did this thing? Abraham said, I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife. Besides, she is indeed my sister, the daughter of my father, though not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And when God caused me to wander from my father's house, I said to her, this is the kindness you must do to me. At every place to which we come, say to me, he is my brother. What we just learned here is that there's this scheme that's been going on for decades, where everywhere they go, they tell a little half-truth. And a half-truth is also what? A half-lie, or really a full lie, right? You look at it, and there is this thing between them. Hey, we're leaving Ur of the Chaldeans. God has called us out on a mission. He's going to bless us. But I'm afraid. I'm afraid I'm going to die. Hey, that's nice. Normally I have a headset on and I have to struggle not to cough the whole time. I can just go like that. You look at it, and it's this whole plan. I am afraid people will want you, so they will kill me if they know you're my wife. So everywhere we go, we're not going to tell them the whole truth, that you're my wife. We're going to tell them the half-truth, that you're just my sister. And rather than Abraham walking in faith before the Lord, Abraham walked in fear and came up with his own scheme. I heard one pastor talking about this story this week and put it into a funny perspective, saying, what kind of wedding vows were those, right? I promise to love you and keep you and promise to everywhere I go say you're my brother, right? That's just crazy. And yet, everywhere they went, that is what they did. It's not the first time, and it's not the second time. This was a consistent lie that they told in every place they went. Verse 14, then Abimelech took sheep and oxen and male servants and female servants and gave them to Abraham and returned Sarah, his wife, to him. And Abimelech said, behold, my land is before you. Dwell where it pleases you. And to Sarah he said, behold, I have given your brother 1,000 pieces of silver. It is a sign of your innocence in the eyes of all who are with you. And before everyone, you are vindicated. Then Abraham prayed to God, and God healed Abimelech, and also healed his wife and female slaves, so that they bore children. For the Lord had closed all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. This story, like so many stories in the Bible, it's just completely messed up. It's messed up. And we look at this, and what we see is that the man of God, who believed God and it was credited to him as righteous, is the one lying. And the king of the Philistines, the wretched Philistines, is the one who is walking in integrity. Twice in this passage, the phrase integrity of the heart comes up. It is the first place in the Bible that integrity is mentioned. It's the first place. And it's not exhibited by a follower of God. It's exhibited by somebody who is incredibly far from God. Integrity is something that absolutely matters. And unfortunately, within the church today, it is something that's not often talked about and something that is tried to be swept under the carpet. What is integrity? Just a dictionary definition. Integrity is the quality of being honest, having strong moral principles, being morally upright. It's the state of being whole and undivided. One English professor described it this way: having integrity means doing the right thing in a reliable way. It's a personality trait that we admire, since it means a person has a moral compass that does not waver. It literally means having wholeness of character, just as an integer is a whole number with no fractions. Physical objects can display integrity too. If you're going over a rickety old bridge that sways in the wind, you might question its structural integrity. I look at this, and this story just seems backwards to me. Because as Christians, the way we tend to look at the world, what our worldview is this: Christian good, non-Christian bad. Christian good, non-Christian bad. We tend to polarize everything that way, but this has been my experience. Many times in my life, I have experienced more integrity from non-Christians than I have from Christians. Look at, as Christians, the people we put up as leaders over and over again. And I'm not just talking about politics. I'm talking about pastors. Look around over the last few years. How many incredibly famous church leaders have had incredible scandals come out? It has happened over and over and over again. Why? Because we tend to follow people who get the job done, but not people of integrity, people of character, people whose lifestyle reflects who God is. It happens over and over again. And I don't know what it's going to take for Christians to stop and wake up and say, no. Integrity matters within our leaders. Integrity matters within our households. Are we whole Christians? Whole Christians. Where, it's not just we act one way out in public and a different way at home. It's not where we act one way as soon as we pull into the church parking lot and a different way on the entire drive to church. How many of you are humble enough to say, yeah, I've done that before? Yeah. We've all been there. We've all been there. And today I want to blow up the idea that we so often have that Christians are people of integrity and non-Christians are not. I've done business too many times with Christians to know that that just is not true. It's not true. Brothers and sisters, are you a person of integrity? Are you a person of integrity? Now, here's the thing. If you have struggled in your life, maybe it's at work, it's on your taxes, it's with your neighbors, with your spouse, to be a person of integrity. You have somewhere inside of you a secret life that other people don't know about and you don't want it to come out. Can I just say, one, God knows your heart and your mind. You're not fooling him. He already knows what's going on. Two, you can go to him because he is a God who listens. He is faithful and just. He is faithful to forgive. And even look in this story. What Abraham just did is totally not representing the God that he has put his faith in. This is a huge issue that has gone on for decades in Abraham's life. And it's being exposed in a big way for a second time in his life. Does God say, Abraham, you're out? No. In fact, the crazy part of this story is he receives incredible grace, and specifically from the one that he lied to. Did you catch that? Abimelech doesn't attack him. Abimelech doesn't go after him. He questions him. He could have very easily said, all right, you know what? You lied to me. Get off my land. Get out of here. But that's not what Abimelech does. God moved in the situation in such a way to, one, bring Abraham's sin to the forefront, but two, graciously deal with it. And at the end of the day, Abraham is still following God, but Abimelech has said, it's all right. Here's all of my land before you. You're a nomad. Feel free to go put your tent wherever you want. That is the God we serve. He exposes our sin so that we can find grace and walk with him. Now, here's the incredible thing, too, with this story. Genesis 21:1. Let me go just a little bit farther. The Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did to Sarah as he had promised. If you were to sum up that one verse with one word, it could be integrity. He is the God of integrity. He is whole. He is complete. He never lies. He never has some hidden part out there that is like, I'm just and I'm merciful and all this stuff, but there's this one secret area that I'm not going to let other people know about. He is whole and true unto himself. That's why in Revelation, when Jesus returns, the rider on the white horse has a name. And what is the name? Faithful and true. That's who he is. Verse 2, and Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the time of which God had spoken to him. Abraham called the name of his son who was born to him, whom Sarah bore him, Isaac, which means he laughs. Right? We found twice. First, Abraham laughed at the news, then Sarah laughed at the news. Now Isaac is just named, he laughs. Verse 4, and Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, and as God had commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. And Sarah said, God has made laughter for me. Everyone who hears will laugh over me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age. God said it, and it was true. And he was faithful to complete it, even though time and time again, Abraham, who believed God, and it was credited to him as righteous, tried to take things into his own hands. Abraham's not a perfect man whatsoever, but he is a man who walked with God through the good times and the bad. Now I look at this and I want to be like that. I don't want to be someone who's known for having secret hidden parts that someday is exposed. I don't want to be somebody that has a reputation for only being truthful when it benefits me. It's interesting when you go to Psalm 15, I particularly like it in the NIV version. There's a whole psalm about the type of people that are able to come before the Lord. And one of the lists on that list are the person who keeps their oath or their promise even when it hurts. That's a person of integrity. I gave my word, I said it, and now I'm understanding more circumstances. I don't like it, this is gonna hurt, but I'm gonna walk in integrity. I'm going to be true. That's why when you go to the Sermon on the Mount, all of the different issues with the Jewish nation that Jesus addresses, things like, murder and anger, adultery and lust. He addresses all these huge things, and as one of them, he says, hey, just simply let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no. Is that what we are known for? Being people that just simply let our yes mean yes, our no mean no. The kind of person that when you give your word and you say, I will do something, you follow through and you do it. Years ago, I met a friend of my dad's. Really connected well with the guy. His name was Tim Coop. Anyone named Tim I connect with, right? Tim's of a feather, right? Tim Coop was the pastor of just a huge church in Arizona. And I went out to coffee with him and I asked him, I said, okay, what is the best thing about pastoring a church of like 3,500 people? And what is the hardest thing about pastoring a church that size? And he just looked at me and he said, the hardest thing about pastoring a church this size is I spend the vast majority of time reminding people of what they said they would do for the Lord. I was like, what? He said, oh yeah. I have people all the time volunteering, saying, I want to start this ministry, want to do that ministry. I'm going to give to this over here, somebody over here. They're struggling with their rent, and so I'll go ahead and give to it. All of these different commitments. And he said, that's the thing with Christians. I just have to go around all the time and remind them what they said they would do. That's not integrity. That's not letting your yes mean yes. Your no mean no, even when it hurts. Now, here's the thing. I want to be that type of person. I strive to be that type of person. I want our church to be known for that as a place of integrity. And I'm not saying it's not. But we're not God. We don't know what the integrity of every individual's heart is. So brothers and sisters, if this is an area where you're feeling conviction today, there's some area there. He is faithful and true. Scripture says he is faithful to forgive, which means this: go to him, talk to him, ask him to forgive you, and that is cast as far as the east is from the west. Here's the thing I love about this whole concept of integrity and the fact that he is faithful and true. Let me read just a couple different passages to you, just to go a little bit deeper with this, to tell you more about the character of our God. Matthew 28, verse 18, we're going to start there, and you guys know this passage well. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And we always stop right there. We always talk about what we are called to do, what we're supposed to do. But do you see the promise that comes next? And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. He is faithful. He is true. Even at the times where we don't walk in integrity, when we don't walk in a wholeness of our Christian faith, he is with us. He will not leave you. He will not forsake you. Go to him. Listen to him. He will forgive. You are his. I could go through the New Testament and find just promise after promise after promise of who our God is and the promises he gives us, and because he's promised it, it will happen. That's the whole reason why he almost killed Abimelech in Genesis. Because he said, 1 year from now, Sarah, you're going to be pregnant. And he had to make it known that that child that was going to be born 1 year from then was Abraham's child, not Abimelech's. So he puts up these very strict boundaries. He's faithful and true, and he always follows through on his word. So brothers and sisters, before we end this, let me read just a few more verses. And what he says here, he is faithful and true, and he will uphold. Revelation 22:7, and behold, I am coming soon. Blessed is the one who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book. Verse 12, behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay each one for what he has done. I am the Alpha, the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Verse 16, I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you about these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright and morning star. And my favorite verse in all of the Bible, verse 20. Surely I am coming soon.